Welcome to the Lessons from the Game podcast, the podcast where we break down the hard-hitting lessons from rugby and show how they apply performance, mindset and resilience, both on and off the field.
I'm Ben Pegna, and alongside Guthrie Steenkamp, we sit down with top players, coaches and experts to uncover what it really takes to succeed.
Hi everybody and welcome to our podcast, Lessons from the Game. I'm here with my co-host, Ben Pegna. Ben, how are you doing, brother?
Yeah, really good, mate. How are you?
All right, brilliant, man. Brilliant. Nice and cold here in La Rochelle in France, but super excited. Last time you put me in a hot seat on our previous episode where you interviewed me. So today, that will be you. Are you worried? Are you scared? Are you okay?
Mate, always excited. Yes. Enjoying it, genuinely.
All right. Okay, guys. So the goal of today's podcast to give you a bit of insight to my co-host, Ben, and what he's achieved and his pathway. He's played for some amazing teams. He's played for London Scottish. He played for Saracens. He played for the Leopards in South Africa. He had a stint in Australia as well. He'll talk more about that. And he's also played for Wasps as well. And back in the day, there were some greats coming through like James Haskell. But Ben, I want to get right into it. Okay, you got loads of experience. You've traveled all over the world. You got loads of experience in the corporate space, but also in rugby. I know you're passionate about a lot of things. But tell me, how did that happen that Jose Mourinho, former football coach, or maybe he's a current, I know nothing about football, all right? Maybe you can tell me afterwards where he's coaching, if he's still coaching, whatever. All right, but we actually helped you to dish up a plate of food.
Yeah, you got me there. So I ended up, as I was ending up playing rugby, I was coming to the end of my career, and I was always busy trying to do things away from the field. I was never like a PlayStation guy, always trying to be active. And I joined an organization called Right to Play. And immediately Right to Play said, look, can you manage all the partnerships that we've got, but also can you build relationships with existing sporting organizations in the UK? And the first partnership we did was with Chelsea Football Club. And so I joined Chelsea. It was in March 2007. And Jose Mourinho at the time was the manager there, and he was the self-proclaimed special one. And the very first thing I had to do was take Jose on this trip to Ghana alongside Michael Essien, who at the time was one of the best midfielders in the world. And then about 26 other guys. And that included guys who've gone on to become really established managers now in their own right. So guys like Paul Clement, who was an assistant manager at Real Madrid with Ancelotti, and Eddie Newton and Mickey Beale, who's a manager, and all these other people. But so day one, we get to Ghana, and Jose's pretty intimidating. He could be an intimidating guy. He's got an amazing reputation, but I'm in charge of everybody really. So I've got to look after everybody. I'm hosting everybody. And I've also just broken my hand because I'm still playing rugby. So I've got a cast on my right hand because I've got a thumb fracture. And I can't serve, it's a buffet and I can't serve myself food. So I've sorted everybody else out and they're around the corner, so they can't really see me. And I'm there just using my left hand to take the lid off the food and then get my plate and then put the rice on and, in the middle of a cry in Ghana. And suddenly I just sent somebody over my shoulder and I look round and it's Jose. And Jose's seen me from the table. He's looked round. He's seen me. He's seen because I was sitting next to him and I'm not there. And he's come round and then he just says, "Oh, can I serve your food for you?" And I was like, no, I'm fine, and just soldiered on by myself. But it was for me, it was a real insight because you hear about all these different guys, you hear about their fearsome reputations, and he's got a reputation of being a certain type of person. And he, in my experience, especially back then, he was far from that, really humble guy, very hardworking, obviously, but he knew everybody's name, treated everybody the same, was just a genuine guy. So it was a funny experience, but a real good lesson for me, actually, from a long time ago.
Awesome. So we always say we learn every single day with the people we speak to, the people we encounter and cross paths with. Is there anything that stood out from that time spent? Obviously, you were there helping them and accommodating them on their trip in Ghana. But did you have any conversations with him or anything that you were just a fly on the wall, just taking in as much as possible?
Yeah, I was. I was because of the role. I was having to do everything. So, like, I didn't do the security myself, but like, there was the security team, there was the PR people, there was the press. We had, we put on this workshop, this football workshop, and the organisation was using. I was with Right to Play, but I was in the Chelsea training ground often, and so I was always around that environment, and so I did learn from everybody I encountered at the time. With him, it was incredible. Just the way he handled himself, the thing that stood out for me is, as I just mentioned, he just was always, he knew people's names. I remember he knew the tea lady's name at Everton Football Club at Goodison. He would go there and he'd know her first name and all these things. I think one of the things I learned from how other people did it badly, we learned from both good and bad examples. But one of the things that I saw was somebody who only speaks to people if they need something, and
Yeah.
Mourinho was the opposite. He would speak to you or hold the door for you. He wouldn't just expect, because he's the boss, that you're going to hold the door for him. If he's walking in front of you, he'd hold the door for you, which is a basic thing. So I learned that, if I didn't really need to learn that, but it was really emphasized for me that you treat everybody the same, which I thought was awesome.
It shows a great sign of humility. And I think also the example we actually help you dish up your plate, that's also a massive sign of empathy as well. I think that's very important when it comes to leadership, to have that empathy and also have that humility. That's very important. And while we're on the football note, even though the majority of our audience is avid rugby supporters, rugby coaches, rugby players that are aspiring to achieve greater things in their careers and in their life. But while we're on that, we know footballers are different to rugby players. All right. And I know you encounter a lot of professional football players. You are from the time to time, and I know you can't share who they are, but you do mentor certain football players, professional football players. Is there a massive difference for you between professional football players and rugby players, just outside of the whole stigma, where obviously when you just touch a football player, he falls to the ground, he's crying, shedding tears, screaming, even though nobody really touched him, but the whole drama effect. Outside of that, is there any massive difference? What's the big difference for you between professional footballers today and professional rugby players?
Well, in the UK, I can only speak about the UK with the football. The guys in the Championship and the Premier League are earning ridiculously. They're earning big salaries, much bigger than rugby players in the main. And as a result, they are very cautious, I think, with who they surround themselves with. And that's definitely one element of it. I think the other element is that a footballer will be in an academy from the age of, say, 5 or 6. And so they have to grow up really young. They mature really young. So you meet a footballer who's 18. He's lived a lot of life already. He's probably been in an academy being treated almost like a junior professional for more than 10 years already. So when they get released by a club, say at 18 or 20 or 21, whatever it might be, they've been with for 3/4 of their life in this environment. So they're generally quite different because of that, I find. But they're aspirational. The best guys have a work ethic. You look at, say, Frank Lampard, incredible work ethic, good guy, very intelligent, both on and off the field, knew how to maximize his strengths, knew what he was good at. So he put him. So from that point of view, I think there's a lot of similarities. Yeah, for sure. The best guys know how to maximize what they're good at and then amplify that and do it over and over again.
I think that explains a lot. We often we hear this where a lot of people say that our high-profile rugby players are way more approachable than footballers. And, I think it explains a lot, just what you said, the amount of money they're earning, the amount of attention that's on them. I think the microscope is even zoomed in way more into football players than rugby players. I don't think always rugby players appreciate that, the amount of scrutiny that other athletes go through. Yeah. Even though we do see today the role of social media in the modern game of rugby. And while we're talking about that, social media, it's an unbelievable tool. Some of us use it to learn. Some of us use it just to fill up time, fill up the void. It becomes a bit of an addiction. I used to be someone that used to spend a lot of time on social media, but now I'm more intentional with my time on social media, whether that's connecting with my community or whether it's sharing a story, sharing a message. What role do you believe does social media have today for professional rugby players? are they using it correctly? And what advice would you give to rugby players out there on how they can use social media to their advantage?
Yeah, it's a big question, but I think when the guys use it well, it's used very well, and when they use it poorly, it's used very, very poorly. And the difficulty is it's just a distraction, and I find myself on it too much. I find myself in a quiet moment, and then I just go, oh, pick up my phone. And as a sportsman, if you're doing that before the match, it affects everything from your how you can react to the people around you, your ability to take on board information. So that's purely from a physical performance point of view. From an external, thinking from an external point of view, I think the sports, the people that use it really well are very authentic, and they get themselves across, and they sort of build a brand, and they understand that what they're doing at the moment doesn't define them. So if they're a rugby player, that's not who they are. It's just an aspect of their life, but they know that after their career finishes, they're going to have to do something else. And so they're building almost a public CV, if you like, of who they are. And the more authentic they can be doing that, then there'll be a better alignment with potential partners, sponsors, work opportunities, and things like that. And then obviously you can use it to learn and study and really, get best case scenarios or best case practice and adopt that as well. So you can see a guy in the US who's training in basketball, and you think, oh, actually, I could incorporate that into my training. So I think guys could use it more for that. And yeah, obviously it's a bit like, it's not intrinsically bad by itself, but it just depends how you use it, doesn't it?
No, for sure. Great answer. I think, excuse me for that. Social media, I think, has a massive role if it's used correctly. I've recently been asked this question, Ben, as a coach, fortunate that I'm very privileged to be coaching in a high performance environment, that I'm quite present on social media. Not that I'm posting every day, but I am present on it. And we don't really see this in a lot of coaches in the elite sports. And as I explained, I use it as a platform to inspire. I've experienced so many great things as a rugby player, some great teachable moments. And I would just love to share this with the audience. And that's also why we are doing this podcast. So I do believe as rugby players and coaches, if it's used correctly, you can use it to inspire, but also, as you mentioned, to build the brand. But I think the biggest advice we can give to our audience has been that they shouldn't become obsessed with social media. Use it as a tool to build your brand, but doesn't define who you are. All right. Like you mentioned, the word you used was authentic, being your authentic self, and also giving people insights into the world that they live in. But right, let's rewind all the way back. All right. You're way wiser than me. Got a few years on me, Ben. All right.
So same hairline.
Same hairline. Right, Ben. You've played for some great teams. We know you started at London Scottish, if I'm not mistaken, but you also played at Saracens. What can you tell us about the start of your rugby journey, your experiences, and were there some players that you have the privilege of playing with were like big names in the game of rugby?
Yeah, I guess my journey started a bit before that. I went to a school in just outside Reading in the countryside in England, and the school was a rugby school. Rugby, football, cricket. That they were the three sports we played most predominantly. And if you didn't play rugby, then you weren't going to get very far in the school in terms of the hierarchy and how things operated. Probably similar to yourself in South Africa. And as a result, I was quickly sort of immersed in rugby. I was the smallest kid. I was the youngest kid when I joined. I'm the youngest in the year. And then suddenly I'm just thrown in the deep end. So for me, it was I was a competitive person already, but it was a sort of a bit about survival at that stage, and that sort of shaped, I think, how I then played from onwards from there. I loved rugby. I started in the B team, and I worked my way up. And then when I left school, I was like, well, the game hasn't gone professional, but I want to play. And I was like, who are the best in my position? Who do I really like? Who do I aspire to be like? And it was people like Michael Jones in in New Zealand, and a couple of other guys. And so I took myself off to New Zealand when I was 18. Worked in the forestry. And while I was there, I was playing club rugby, but I was 18 and I was playing senior men's rugby. I played some age group rep stuff. But it was tough, but it was a bit of a baptism of fire for me. Each week you'd play against a different rep player, provincial player, provincial B player, or whatever it would be. And so there was a steep learning curve there, especially as a sort of a small 18-year-old playing loose forwards. And then I came back and I played for Caerphilly in Wales before the regions, but the game had gone pro. And then I had this opportunity to go to London Scottish in the Premiership in England. And then whilst I was there, I really enjoyed it. But we went from 14 to 12 teams. The Premiership, they decided to reduce it. And London Irish, London Scottish and Richmond merged in inverted commas. But it was suddenly I found myself out of a job. And all of a sudden, my London Scottish coach, I just got a call out of the blue. Alan Zonda, who you know, I'm sure you know well. Alan called me and said, "Look, do you want to come to Saracens? There's an opportunity here. I'm definitely going to need backup for Richard Hill because he's going to be away for the World Cup. Francois Pinard's, you know, et cetera, et cetera." So I was just like, gee, like I was out of a job, and now suddenly I've got pretty much like the Galacticos, the team full of superstars, calling me up, you know. So I went over to Saracens and I joined there. I wasn't there long enough. I didn't play enough because I was stuck behind Pienaar and Hill and a guy called Dick Rose and a couple of other guys. But it was an incredible experience. We just had, I think, 18 internationals in the team. We had Thierry Lacroix, Danny Grucock, Dave Flatman, Roberto Grau, Paul Wallace, Scott Murray in the second row. The guys I've already mentioned, Kieran Bracken, et cetera, et cetera. So Dan Luger was on one wing. So we had an amazing team. So that was a really good experience for me. But at the time, we didn't have there was no A-team league. So there was no opportunity to play. I was just training. So I was like, jeepers, I'm on the bench or I'm not even involved. I'm just training. I'm holding tackle bags. I need to play. So that that just fueled me, you know, and just gave me this even more of a burning desire to be like those guys. And so that was a great experience at a young stage.
Oh, awesome. And you touched base on something because you still had a long journey after that, Ben. You weren't playing much, but you were just there for training. You know, what was your mindset back then as a player that's not getting game time? How did you keep on going forward?
Yeah, I love training. I do like training, and I was getting better every day. I did get frustrated. And so when I advise players a lot now, it's not necessarily what I did do, but what I should have done in that situation, you know? And I was really, at one stage, I was arrogant, you know, because I don't think if you're in that, I think the position that you have to be in is you believe you can play. So, Francois was a very different player to me, but I thought he's old, he's over the hill, you know. And, you know, my mindset was like, I should be playing, I should be involved. But obviously he's the captain, he's the, you know, coach, CEO, basically. He was running the show. So I turned around to the club. I said, "Look, I need to play. Can you let me go?" You know, and they were going to let me go, I think, anyway. So it was like, okay, but I need to go. And what I would love to have done if I could have trained there and then played at the weekends and been loaned out. But at that stage, they didn't do things like that. So so I was a bit arrogant, and I was like, I need to play instead of just being stuck. And you know what rugby's like; it's so attritional. I should have just stayed, bided my time. So with young players, I just say, just control what you can control. Get your head down, learn from those guys, be that sponge. And I tried to do those things, but I was just sort of, well, I'm not getting any younger, and I want to play, you know.
Ben, we all know the history between South Africa and England, all right? And for some reason, we get along very well, being a South African and an Englishman. We know there's lots of history between the two countries. What the hell were you doing in South Africa? And on top of that, I think, if I'm not mistaken, you were playing in Port, you were playing for the Leopards. Tell us about that move.
Yeah.
How did it happen? And why did you go all the way to South Africa to pursue your...
Well, funny enough, I probably would have had this sort of traditional English mindset of, you know, with this, challenge or competitive thing against South Africa, if you can think of it like that. But I don't obviously now, because I've spent so much time there over the last 20 plus years. So I played with Yanni de Beer, the old South African fly half. We became good mates, and we became good mates to London Scottish. Then he went back to South Africa, played at the World Cup in '99, kicked 5 drop goals against England, you know, and you want your mates to do well. Obviously, I wanted England to win at that stage, but you want your mates to do well. So I was over the moon. And so anyway, with Saracens, with Alan Zonda, with Francois Pienaar, there was a South African connection. And I'd said to Alan, look, I need to play, and he agreed. So the idea was to go to South Africa for a short period of time, you know, and just come back. But I ended up going there. And when I was there, I was due to go and play some club rugby and then bounce back to the UK. And with some game time under my belt, hopefully have kicked on as a player. And while I was there, I got offered a contract up in Potch, you know. which for people that don't know, it's about 2 hours west of Joburg. It's a small mining town, student town, university town, well known now for the Northwest University, the old Puck. And yeah, it was a great experience. Actually, I was in SA for 3 years as a player, but I've still, my kids, two of my kids are, my kids are from South Africa. So yeah, and it,
Cool.
yeah, so and so it's they're obviously in the blood now, and so it's a place that I've got a huge fondness for.
All right. Can you speak Afrikaans?
Can I detail? Yeah, yeah.
All
Um,
right. South Africa are known for a lot of things, but what are your favorite things of South Africa? Whether it's food, drink, or an experience you had while you were there, what were some of your favorite and fondest memories of South Africa?
yeah, well, I love the food. Obviously, I love the beautiful landscape. It's beautiful. Every place you go is a bit different. It's beautiful. It's an amazing country. I actually love the people, and I love of all different types of people, and I love the hope in that. There's just this smiling type of bubbling optimism, even with all the difficulties. I love that about it's a sort of a can-do attitude, a can-do mindset. I find that I get frustrated in some other countries when you travel and it's so well we've done it like we know someone else tried that and it doesn't work. Whereas there's this entrepreneurial nature of a lot of South Africans who've had to make a way because they're not going to get handed anything. And I love that about the people. But obviously I love the braais, I love the beach, I love all those things. I got addicted to cream soda when I was
Well, you know,
that was that was probably my weakness, and I was trying to always put on weight as a player. And the nutritionist made the mistake of telling me, you can drink, you could put in a lot more calories. And I was like, right, cream soda. It's like, and so people in the UK don't really know cream soda like there. So it's a bright green. It looks like it's toxic.
yeah,
Like,
I love it. You love it.
yes. Oh man, I'm addicted to it. So that's why I can't have it often. Because if I have one, I have to have like loads more. But here we never had that. So when I went there, I remember Yannick giving me the first cream soda, and he just laughs about it now. He took me to a Spur. I remember it to this day. Like I
Still go to the Spur when I go back to South Africa. I love it. Spur.
I bankrupted him. I was just like keeping back lazy age steaks and like so it was and cream soda. So yeah, lots of things, but the people are amazing, and I love I love a lot of the mindset and outlook.
No, on a lighter note, Ben, due to my playing career and also coaching career, it wasn't always possible for me to go back to South Africa. And there was a stint where I wasn't back for 8 years. 8 years, can you believe it? And it just shows you get caught up in your own little bubble. And eventually I had to go back to South Africa, and it was a crazy story. My passport was expired. I sent the papers to the embassy. They sent my file to South Africa. And I actually missed out on the Champions Cup final in 2023 because I couldn't travel. And so for some reason, my file got lost, and big dilemma. Anyway, long story short, I eventually traveled to South Africa with my little girl. It was the first time she was going back since she was a baby. So that was quite cool, seeing our family. And, living in France, going back to South Africa, I realized how much I miss it. I love my country. I know there's a lot of expats that speak illy of South Africa. I love my country. Each country has its own battles, its own challenges. But then my daughter discovered Spur as well. I would lie to you. And obviously, my parents were happy having us there. And ever when we went out on a trip, then they would take us out for a feed. So where do you want to go? I was going to go eat. Myself and my daughter would reply every time with the same response, Spur. And I would order the same thing every single time. Double cheddar melt burger with chips and onion rings, put over the Thousand Island sauce, and then I will have my waffle with ice cream and golden syrup. Every single time, the same thing.
Mate, it's funny because there's obviously a Spur in the airport at OR Tambo, so if I'm interconnecting on a domestic flight, when I was there last July working with the Bulls, I think I went to Cape Town first. So the first thing I do is go to Vida Cafe, and when you go in, the guys are singing and they're just like, "How are you?" and they mean it, and it's just this electricity, this energy, which is just incredible. And then, if I'm not connecting, when I just go pop upstairs to the Spur. So the very first thing I do is pop to the Spur. So when I was flying last year, it was like the Bulls were playing Leinster as I was flying, and then I was just arriving in time for the week building up to the final for the URC against Glasgow. But I was like, I need to watch the length of the game because I'm going to be asked about it.
Yeah.
What are my thoughts on the game in the next couple of days? And so like I popped up, okay, good excuse to go to Spurs. Just
All right. So for our audience that's not South African, Spur is like a household brand in South Africa. Definitely check it out if you're in SA. Would definitely advise you. Please don't expect 5-star food, but it's such great comfort.
you know what you're going to get each time.
What? Yeah, exactly.
You know what
Exactly.
you're going to get, and you got a banker there, and you can just boom.
So Ben, you touch base on it there. You work with the Bulls, if I'm not mistaken, it was with the academy players or maybe with some of their senior players and coaching staff. Tell us a bit about that experience. What was that all about? I'm a former Bulls player, Fortress Loftus, and I saw some photos on social media, you being on the B field, where I shedded some blood, sweat, and tears back in the day, some great memories. We spoke to my former S&C coach back in the day, Basil Karras, on this pod as well. But now tell us about your experience there. What was it all about?
Yeah, I think the first time I'd actually gone to Loftus to watch in maybe 2003. I think that was maybe my first time going to Loftus. And actually, no, tell a lie. I went with Yanni Beer when he was playing there, and had a look around and stuff like that, which was amazing. Went back and watched. I remember watching Super Rugby there. And then in 2004, I actually played a Super Rugby warm-up game for the Leopards against the Bulls at Loftus for the first time, which was incredible. But I've gone back and coached in South Africa most years. And in around 2008, 2009, I was in SA. I was doing some coaching in Potch, and then I was down visiting the Stormers. And at the time, I coached a young hooker called Edgar Maratule. And then I reconnected because in 2018, John Mitchell was at the Bulls. And I ended up doing a bit with Mitch around the attack and unstructured attack and something called tactical periodization and how to coach that and all that type of stuff. But Edgar was a player there then. He'd moved via the Kings, I think, and then ended up at the Bulls. And so we reconnected, and then he had to retire. So he's become a coach, and now he heads up the junior section of the Bulls. And he reached out to me about a year and a half ago and just said, look, if you ever get an opportunity, can you come and do some work with us? Can you come do some coach education work with me and my guys? And also, can you coach us, especially around that attack, the unstructured attack, and sort of the methodology that I've been coaching for the last 10 years. So obviously, yeah, any opportunity to go back there, coach with a good guy, etc. So it was brilliant. Yeah, great experience. Always good going to Pretoria. I love it. Ballers are just so much, again, so much potential there. You know better than I do, but yeah, I love it. Great experience.
Awesome. I've got some fond memories of the Bulls back in the day. Obviously, we had an unbelievable generation winning some back-to-back Super Rugbies. But, often on our podcasts, Ben, I always tell you, hold the horses, hold the horses. Just want to geek out with all the guests that we have. So now I'm going to give you an opportunity to geek out. All right? Being a prop, but kind of has a bit of a rugby intelligence. I know what the game is all about, but without making a fool of myself, explain to all the coaches out there and props that want to really take their game to another level. What the hell is tactical periodization? That's a mouthful.
That man. Yeah.
You dropped the word. You dropped it. Oh, no.
The short answer and the long answer. The tactical periodization is a way of training, a methodology that involves training the tactical, technical, mental, and physical all at the same time. So it's like a global approach. And they've used that in football for quite a long time. And there's a way of doing that where you do different things on different days. Like one day will be referred to as an install day, another day will be a faster day, another day will be et cetera, but you periodize over a period of time as well as during the week. So microcycle and a bigger macro cycle. But within that, you are framing the training so that you have a session that looks like something like the game, and you're incorporating the tactical, the technical, mental, and physical all at the same time, as opposed to doing a drill in isolation that might only incorporate the technical, but not much tactical, because the player might say, well, when do I do this? Why do I do this? If I don't know why and when, what's the relevance? So that's the idea behind tactical periodization.
Oh, awesome. That's interesting. That's an episode on its own there. Definitely be deep diving into that one, Ben, in one of our lessons from the game episodes. So for our audience, if you haven't picked it up yet, at the time of this recording, we haven't launched our podcast yet, but on a weekly basis, we'll do our best to launch an episode with an unbelievable guest. But Ben and myself, we will be deep diving into questions that you ask us on social media or that we receive via DMs or LinkedIn or Instagram, TikTok, whatever. So that's a great one to, how can I say, deep dive into. All right. Okay, so let's move on. I've got loads of questions. I've digged up some dirt, my brother. All right. We are both passionate about mental resilience and how you can build it. And we often talk about you need to get out of your comfort zone if you want to achieve something, if you want to become stronger physically, mentally, and emotionally. You can't just stick to the things you know, stick to the things which you feel comfortable doing. Explain to me this. Why the hell would you want to swim across the English Channel? That makes no sense.
Yeah, I love training. I do try and do something most days, and I hadn't really swum. I swam as a kid, but I think I thought I was better than I was as a swimmer as a kid. And then, obviously you do the rugby, do other things, and I hadn't swum at all really. And, occasionally do some recovery sessions and you'd swim, but that was it. And a mate of mine is a guy called Alex Popham, who played in the back row for Wales. He played for Brive, Leeds, Scarlets, the Dragons, top man. And he runs an organization called Head for Change. And I'd reached out to him like a few months before the swim, like maybe 8 months before the swim, because it takes a lot of time to prepare. And I said, look, mate, I'm going crazy. I need a challenge to aim towards. I need a focus point because I'm training, but I'm not training for anything. I need a goal. I want to be able to have that motivation, that fire underneath me. If it's in a team environment, even better, so that I'm motivated by the guys around me and I don't want to let anybody down. Anyway, he's like, yeah, I'll keep that in mind if we get anything. And we've got the swim, obviously, but all the places are taken. And then the swim was, they were swimming as a relay, and it was two teams, a rugby union team racing against the rugby league team. And it was in October 2023. And anyway, long story short, I get a call in July 2023, and it's Alex, and he says to me, Ben, Ryan Jones, the former Welsh Lions back rower, he's had to pull out. Do you want to take his place? I was like, yeah. I just went, where? Yeah. And he went,
you changed your underpants after that. Or...
No, mate, it's funny. Yeah, you can ask it. It was really bizarre, but I just went, yeah. And then he was like, do you need time to think about it? I said, no, I'm in, And then I thought, I probably underestimated how hard it was in my mind, but that was probably a good thing, because if I'd known how hard it was going to be, I think I would have, and anyway, but then when I worked it out, by the time that was about the end of the first week of July, I was on the way to South Africa to go and coach. And so that meant I was going to start my training sort of end of July, beginning of August, giving me about 10 weeks to get ready to swim the channel.
Wow.
Yeah. And so I was just like, oh. So it only hit me actually when I, so anyway, I wanted to do it. Why did I do it? I wanted to do a challenge. I needed a challenge to aim towards. I needed to get out of my comfort zone. I love that idea. I wanted to be around a team environment again. I knew that would be great. And this for a great cause as well, raising money for Head for Change, who do incredible work to support rugby players and former sports people who are suffering with head injuries, And so I was like, this is great. I'd love to be involved. So that's why I did it. But then, yeah, it was, there were a couple of, that was the start. And then it was a bit tricky getting ready for it.
So firstly, I'm scared of the water. I can't swim. I can swim, but if you call doggy paddling swim, then that's me. But then I imagine, you knew it was a massive, okay, I can understand that being a former rugby player, that's what we live for. We love training. Not everybody. We've seen, unfortunately, some of our teammates that have blown up. I also train every single day when I can, unless if I'm a bit ill or I need to recover. I listen to my mom. I've learned to be a bit more mindful and more balanced. But you knew it was a challenge. That's okay. But I think there was at some stage where you realized what you let yourself in for. And often when we start something and we realize the gap that we need to bridge in order to fulfill our challenge or get that desired result, it can set off some fears. Were there any fears that you faced at the start of it, when you started training for this challenge of swimming across the English Channel, and how did you overcome them?
Yeah, mate, a great question, because what happened was I got on that plane to South Africa. I got there and I was coaching, I was busy. And then I rang a mate of mine he works at Menlo Park School in Pretoria. And I said, mate, can I come through and train and use the pool? And it was holiday. But I went through big 50 outdoor pool, big 50-meter pool, but it's July in Pretoria. And I think I started filming, for the old social media. I better do my, document the journey. I get in the pool, I do 4 lengths. I can't even keep my head under because it's freezing. And I was knackered, and I couldn't breathe because it was taking my breath away. So I couldn't even breathe. I got out and I took a photo, and I was just, I've got this photo still. And I was just thinking, oh my word, what have I done? What have I signed up to? I could only do 4 lengths, which is like 200 meters. And I'm going to have to swim kilometers, the English Channel, what is it, 22 miles or something. So I was just like, oh my word, what have I done? And that hit me. That was the awakening moment for sure. And then I had to put a plan in place quickly of what I could do and what I could, I had to think, well, just relax, control what you can control. What can you do? And then I put a plan in place of exactly what I could do. And I was like, can I do 20 minutes? And the long story short, I just was like, what can I do tomorrow? Okay, I can do 20. Can you do 20 minutes tomorrow? Yeah, I can do 20 minutes tomorrow. Well, you can do 30 minutes the following day then, can't you? I was like, yeah, okay. And I sort of gave myself those targets and said, okay, by the end of the week, you can do like 3 sessions of, say, 30 minutes, the first one of 20 minutes, and then we'll reassess where we are and build a plan for the following week. And then I built from there. And then I sort of chipped away at it and I put another plan in place.
So what would you say is one of the reasons that you did it? So firstly, congratulations on that. And it was for unbelievable cause as well. But what would you say were the key elements that allowed you? Obviously, there was the drive. There's no doubt about that. And you overcame your fears. But what were the key elements for you that actually allowed you to achieve your goal?
So the key thing, I think it's so transferable to everybody, whatever you do in life. So I firstly, I had a really clear goal, and so without a vision, you perish, so I had a really clear goal, and I knew what it was. I wrote it up on the wall. This is what I'm going to do. And I visualized, this is what I'm going to do. I visualized actually getting in the water first and, going first for the team. I visualized the most hard circumstances, what it was going to be like. And I imagined it to be in my mind. I managed myself doing it, but in a lot worse situation than it actually ended up being, in a much harder scenario than it ended up being. And then I just put a plan in place and it was, okay, right, can I swim every day? Okay, if I swam every day between now, I've got 10 weeks, what would that look like? And then I sort of worked backwards from that endpoint. What do I need to be doing? And so I worked up after about 3 weeks. I said, look, can I stay in the pool for an hour at a time? And then, so I got to that point. And then when I could get to in an hour, I was like, okay, can I do 1 hour 15? What can I do? How far can I go in 1 hour and 15 minutes? So I really took it down to bite-sized chunks. And then once I got to 1 hour 15, I was like, right, I can stay in the water for an hour and 15. I reckon if I stay in the water for an hour and 15 and tread water and have to go again, I can survive. I'm not going to drown. Because it really dawned on me, you can't just start walking. It's not like a marathon. You can just start walking. If you're swimming the channel, you're in the middle of the channel, you can't just stop. You have, because you go backwards. So you have to keep going. So I was like, okay, what you need to be able to do is stay in at least an hour, because then we're going to swap people around. But they say an hour and 15 because there's a buffer. Okay. And then I did that at a pretty slow pace. And then I said to myself, right, once can get to 115 without stopping, then we're going to do 45, but they're more like intervals, but quicker. So the objective then was to do in about 45 to 50 minutes what I could do in an hour and 15. And then I started mixing up my training, but only at that stage, because I was getting advice flying in from everybody. I reached out to a few people, and at one stage I was like, no, I've got to break this down. This is going to be, because then it became too daunting. I was like, what can I do? I can control swimming every day. I can control, doing some other training every day so that I'm strong and that I'm healthy, that I'm fit, that I'm, aerobically fit. And once I did that, I was able to just put those incremental steps in place.
I think the a follow-up question I would like to ask you, Ben, is look, obviously it was a relay, and you trained well and you were committed to it. But was there a stage when you were in that water where you said to yourself, I can't do this, or I don't think I can do it?
Yeah, close. I got picked up, just outside London. I got picked up. I was in the car, and we had a coach assigned to us because Sky filmed it. Sky Sports filmed the thing, and they made a documentary. And so as I'm in the car, we'd had a coach, Dave, and I'd met him once because we had to do this. That basically when you swim in the channel, they have to come and see that you can swim. You have to do sort of an assessment to make sure you're okay. And Dave did that for us, and they filmed that, etc. And when I got in the car, basically they call you and they tell you, they message you, say they give you a 24-hour notice that they put you on 24-hour notice. They give you a week that you're going to do the channel. And then they say, okay, we're going to tell you because of the tides, we're going to give you 24 hours notice. So I suddenly got a call. Yeah. So I got a message like when I wake up and then telling us that we're going 4 a.m. the next morning. So, and I was like, okay. So then I was like, okay, cool. And by that stage, I felt ready. So then it's like midnight. A mate of mine is giving me a lift to the service station to get picked up by one of the other guys I'm swimming with. And as I'm getting picked up by him, I message the coach and I say, look, what's the order that we're going in? Who's going first? Because and he's like, I haven't decided, And I messaged him back. I said, look, can I go first? And he was like, do you want to? I said, yeah. I said, yeah. He went, okay, yeah, sweet. And I don't think anybody else was going to want to go first or volunteer. And the reason I wanted to go first was because I was scared to go first. Because it was pitch black and it was by the ships. And two of my sort of things that I was most concerned about were the ships, like these big ferries, the container ships, and the pollution and the oil from that, and then also just the pitch black. You're jumping into the sea and it's just pitch black. So he says, like, yeah, you can do that. So that was the first point where I sort of had my head around it. As soon as I had my head around that was actually okay. And I was in the zone then. It was okay. But it was as we were in the middle of the sea, like we were trying to, the hard part where I didn't want to give up, but I was getting really, really angry and frustrated was 3/4 of the way across the channel, the current's turning and they're telling me to swim quicker because we're not going to get past this bit of the current. And I'm like, I'm giving it everything, and I was knackered and we had to just break, and we did, you just dig in, you find a way of digging in. And funny enough, what happened also was that Carl Heyman, one of your, adversaries, he was meant to do the swim as well. Carl was meant to do the swim and he had to pull out because he fell off his bike in New Zealand, broke his arm and was out, and I knew I was, and this is actually a good tool. And this was really helpful for me. And I think I said this in the meeting to the guys beforehand. I said, look, there's going to be dark moments when I have a dark moment, I'm going to be thinking of Carl because I know that Carl would do anything to be there. And I know that he is gutted that he's been training for a year to do this swim and he can't be there. And I'm just going to be thinking, it's a privilege to do it. Carl would do anything. So as I was going across and I was really struggling, 3/4 away across, and I'm battling, I was like, mate, stop whining. This is actually, Carl would love to be here. You're really privileged to have this opportunity. And as soon as I did that, my mindset just changed again and I was back in it, and it just like, I was like, yeah, we're almost done,
That's awesome. Thanks for sharing that with us, Ben. There's lots of great golden nuggets over there. Well, I want to shift the conversation a little bit because I think which is important that our audience know who's going to be co-hosting with me the show. A lot of people know me for my career, but you've played at international level as well. You've played sevens rugby for England, if I'm not mistaken. All right, take us through that journey and through that experience. Obviously, seeing that you're slightly older than me, back then maybe sevens rugby didn't always get the recognition, but it's evolved into a massive game, a massive circuit. We've seen it with the Olympics. What was your take back then? How did it feel wearing that jersey and representing your country?
Well, yeah, I just have to correct you on one bit there. I didn't get capped, and that's cool, So just so that people are clear. So what happened? I got called up in 2005 by Mike Friday, the coach of the England Sevens team at the time. I got called up, really like, can you come training tomorrow? There's been an injury, and we train out by Heathrow in London. Like, can you come and get ready for Dubai? And I was like, well, yeah, of course, I'm there. I'll run there. And so I went and joined training the next day, and they said, look, you're in the squad. Like, can you, we want to take you to Dubai. So I went to Dubai, and I ended up playing in the B team. They had two teams. But at the stage, you're right, the Sevens was on a different level. It didn't have the profile it does now. But the players that were available for the coach, it was very much part of the pathway, the England pathway. So I ended up playing in this B team. And the guys I played in the B team with, there's a couple of guys who went on to have really good Sevens careers, like Chris Cracknell, and a couple of others. But then in that team, we had guys like a guy called, there's Dan Luger, a World Cup winner in 2003. Okay. We had one of the Simpson Daniel brothers. We had Danny Gray. We had Dave Strettle, the England winger. And a load of other guys, Tom Croft, who played for the Lions in the second row and the back row. So we had some really, really good players. And Nick Bendenon, who had a good career in France. He played for Clermont and for years. So we had some really, really good players. And the A team that year, the first team, they actually won Dubai in that week. And they had some obviously great players like Henry Paul and etc. Some really good Ben Gollings and some other good players. Anymore.
Yes, Ben, I also read up that you also worked with the enemy. You did some work with the RFU. You were a performance analyst. Tell us a bit more about that, your experience with that. What were you doing exactly back then?
Yeah, again, so Sevens wasn't huge then, or wasn't as big as it is now, but it was on the journey. So there was a World Series, and Ben Ryan was the head coach, and I ended up being part of Ben Ryan's. I knew Ben from when I was playing, so I met Ben when he took over from. So I was in that Sevens. I was that player in that Sevens squad, but I didn't get capped. But then Ben Ryan came in as the head coach, and I was still in it. But then I didn't play, and I got the MRSA. I got sick actually, and that was pretty much the end of my career. And anyway, Ben and I had stayed in touch, and he'd asked me stuff about rugby, what I thought of this guy, and etc. Because I was coaching at different places, London Scottish with the academy, and he called me up one day and said, "Look, would you like to be the performance analyst for the England Sevens team?" And I was like, yeah, but I'm not like a trained performance analyst. And he was like, well, I want someone who I know, who I trust, who I think's got a good, I want someone to actually do about 3 or 4 things. I want them to do the analysis. I want them to do the strength and conditioning for the players that don't travel. I want him, can you do individual skills with players? Can you assess players? And so I ended up doing like this. It was amazing, this multifaceted role where I did 3 or 4 jobs in the one job. And with Ben Ryan, and that was a really good experience. And it's only in hindsight we did okay as a team. We didn't have the type of players that when I was playing that were available, and we didn't have all these top Premiership players available. But we had some other good players like Dan Norton and some others, and they became they were quite consistent. But it was a really interesting experience. And one of the things I've learned actually is, it's really easy, you've been in this situation when you get assessed after an event, you lose a match, for example, as a coach, and people are like, oh, the players aren't conditioned well enough. They, oh, you didn't do this right. And I remember them throwing stuff at us like that. We haven't really, England, they're not that good. They should do much better. And it's only in hindsight when you reflect on stuff that you realize, okay, well, what was the real scenario? And the real scenario was that we had a couple of really, really good players, like Dan Norton is the highest try scorer in World Sevens history. He was world class, but we didn't have, I don't think, maybe 1 or 2 other world class players. But when we played against New Zealand had the core of the spine of really experienced players who were very, very good, like DJ Forbes, Tim Mickelson, Tomasi Tharma. But then they also had like this 18-year-old kid who was a man, just like smashing people around. He was Ardy Surveyor. And so it was Ardy Surveyor straight out of school playing sevens, smashing it up. There was a Bryce Heem, there was Wasaki Naholo, there was Charles Piatow, there was Frank Halley. All these guys went on to become good All Blacks. So, and then have really good careers overseas. So only in hindsight, when you look back and reflect, you go, actually, we were playing against some very, very, very good players. And we perhaps didn't have the same caliber of player at our disposal, but we maximized what we had. And our guys gave a very, very good account of themselves on a regular, consistent basis. So that was something I learned from that period for sure.
Okay, awesome. All right. Yeah. So here's a quick question I have for you. Robben Island. All right.
Yeah.
We all visited Robben Island back in the day in South Africa when there was at school. But you being a foreigner, let's say foreigner, Englishman, who I actually like.
Yeah.
But I found some information. What is one of the reasons that you were so intrigued by Robben Island? Obviously, we know its history, but what's one of the main reasons that you went back on a few occasions?
Yeah, I don't know what the first initial thing was. We moved overseas when I was a kid to live overseas, and so I wasn't very inward facing in terms of the British Isles. I was much more aware of the world around us, and my dad used to travel regularly to Africa, to all over Africa, and I was always like intrigued by it, and there were different things that happened along the line, and I remember reading Long Walk to Freedom by Nelson Mandela. And I was just sort of intrigued, and not intrigued, that's probably not the strong enough word, but I admired him and the journey, and I just wanted to find out more. So when I went to South Africa for the first time to visit Yanni de Beer and his wife Vicky and the family, I went down to Cape Town, and I was like, right, one of the things I want to do is go to Robben Island. And so where Nelson Mandela was imprisoned for so long, to really understand. And I think it's really important that you understand where you've come from so that you know where you want to go to. And you understand, where, when people talk about reconciliation and big, big, powerful words, they understand what the context is. So it was incredible. I went there, and when I went there, I was telling everybody about it. And I was amazed by how many of my South African teammates or friends had never been there. And I was like, well, it really is important because you can suddenly have a context and an understanding of why these guys are saying what they're saying, or why they might feel the way they feel now, and why they want to rectify and go forward strongly together with unity, and you'll understand more. And so, yeah, I went back a few times, and it changed. The journey changed. The very first time you were allowed into Nelson Mandela's cell, and all his stuff was still in there. And then the next time I went, you actually weren't allowed in, and they'd just done some stuff. But it was incredible. It left as you can tell, a huge imprint on me. Yeah.
Yeah, I was fortunate enough to have met Nelson Mandela, I remember, in 2005 before Australia. And I actually remember that game. We received a lot of criticism, that team, because taking our history into account, I think we were about 9 players of color in that team. And we took a lot of flack in the media before that, and we were basically labeled as a window dressing team and all that nonsense. By the way, we went to beat on Australia that game as well. But I remember meeting Nelson Mandela. He was sitting on his golf cart. For everybody that knows Alice Park, it's probably got the longest tunnel ever going uphill. But he was sitting just before he had to go down, walking down the tunnel. He was sitting there on a golf cart with his entourage. And he greeted me. He's so excited to see me. And I was like, wow, the president is excited to see me. I was like, this is unbelievable. And he greeted me and said, hey, Os, how are you doing? I was like, that's not my name, but I'll take it. I'm good, Mr. President. I'm good. So he obviously assumed I was Os the Run that played in the 95 World Cup. But I didn't have the heart to correct him. I just enjoyed that moment, which was unbelievable. We're running out of time. I just want to close this off very quickly. And you've been involved in rugby. You've played professionally. You've been involved at the coaching level as well, at the highest level. And then for a few years, you've been involved in the corporate space. If you can tell us a bit more about what you were doing. But most importantly, what lessons from the corporate game have you learned which you can share with rugby players and coaches?
Yeah, I mean, there's obviously a lot of similarities, aren't there? Yeah, I ended up working for our family business, which is based in Dubai. I made a decision in 2014. I'd left England Sevens. I'd been at the academy at Wasps for 3 years, coaching there, and then I was consulting. And And I'd been across and I met Pierre Villepro in France, and sort of changed the way I was coaching, and I wanted to be able to coach that methodology that Pierre uses, and so I started consulting, but it wasn't my full-time thing. So I would go to the Bulls, etc., the Rebels, or whoever it would be, and then I was like, okay, well, it would be great if I could get some corporate experience. And I was also aware we went through a situation where we had kids, and I was like, okay, well, I want some stability as well, and maybe the rugby isn't that stable. So it was a few things that maybe want to sort of branch out and do something different, and also I wanted to help my dad with what he was doing. So I joined the family business in Dubai, but was still located in the UK. So I was traveling back and forth, and then I was going visiting partners around the world or wherever they were, mostly in Europe and some in the US. And so that was really interesting. I think there's a lot of similarities. I think people, get mistaken, and they think you can just take lessons easily. I've played international sport, therefore I'm going to be a great corporate coach, or I'm going to be. And I think if you go in with that approach and that sort of almost lack of humility, then you come unstuck quite quickly. I find with say professional sport, there's some real different, big, significant differences. One of them is you get immediate feedback. So if you and I are working as a business, we might not get feedback for months or even longer, and you might employ somebody and then it takes time, get them up to speed, blah, blah, blah. You get feedback. You'll get feedback this weekend from, did we win or not? You'll get feedback immediately every day from a player. You'll get feedback, and it's really cut and dry. And also in a sporting organization, people might have different reasons why they're motivated, but most of them want you to win on the weekend. You're all pulling in the same direction. What I found in the corporate space is that's not always the case. There's often a sort of a political navigation going on, and so that was difficult. I think, that sort of flexibility, the willingness to learn, the willingness to meet lots of different people, learn in every situation, those things, there's a lot of similarity. So I took that from the corporate space, but I think I already had that within me, from the sport and from everything else I've done. I think it's important just to be versatile, be a good listener. It's something that Mandela used to say. He used to talk about how it worked in the tribal situation, how he watched his father do it, where everybody else would go around a huddle and he would be the last to speak, and his dad would be the last to speak. And I'm not always good at that, but I found that was really advantageous in that corporate space, being the last to speak, so that everybody feels like they've got a voice. Everybody goes around, everybody's got a voice, but then also it allows you the opportunity to engage the room, but engage the sentiment and the temperature, and then act accordingly or do something accordingly. So that was something that they married between the sports world, but I did see that more in practice in that corporate space.
Okay. Questions, because once again, I missed the intro question, which I was supposed to ask you, and ask your end of the show question, right? What is one of the biggest lessons you have learned from your career as a rugby player that you can share with the new generation?
Okay. The biggest lesson I think I learned, and I learned it quite quickly, was learn what you're good at, work out what your strengths are, work out what you're good at, and then find a way of bringing that to the team that you're in, or amplifying that and being able to replicate and duplicate or reproduce that as often as possible, because that is why you will be in the team. So for me as a player, I quickly worked out what I was good at and what I wasn't good at. And I think that is, there's loads of things we could say, like work ethic and etc. But I worked out quickly what I was good at, what I wasn't good at. And that is probably the biggest one. So, there's no point wasting a lot of time and energy on something that you really want to be good at, because you're comparing yourself to somebody else, but you will bring this brilliantly. Concentrate on that. And that's probably the biggest one.
Okay, awesome. Second quick fire question. All right. What is one of the biggest lessons you have learned from the game of rugby that can be transferred to everyday life?
Work ethic. You knew I was going to say that, hey? I mean, the swimming example is a case in point. I had an ability to put one arm in front of the other, but if I hadn't just knuckled down, and then of course I chunked it, I got my goal set, I worked backwards from that end goal and put the processes in place that built daily actions and etc. But without the work ethic to go, this is what I'm going to do. This is what I'm going to do. This is what I'm going to do. And I saw that quite early. The best players, like someone like Yanni de Beer, not only did he do what I just spoke about before, about understanding what he was good at, he knew he was an amazing kicker. Like he knew he could kick. So he built his game around that. But he could actually do a run and run a game and play a running game really well. But he worked really, really hard at his strength so that it became the super strength, so that he was the best kicker in the world for a period of time. And that was a great example, him and other guys like that.
Great. I still have loads of questions here, but I'm just going to put them on my list, which I can bring into our future episodes with all our amazing guests. Ben, it was really insightful. I really enjoyed it. Time flew by. I could have spoken for another few hours. And, it's the great thing. We as co-hosts, we want to share our authentic selves with you guys. But most importantly, we want to inspire you guys and take the lessons that we have learned and our guests have learned and put this into practice. It's easy to set goals, but if you don't follow it up with actions, it just remains a dream. That's the difference for me between a dream and a vision. A vision has actionable steps. And as Ben shared with us with the experience of swimming across the English Channel, when he started out, like, what the hell have I got myself into? But he overcame those mental obstacles. He overcame those physical obstacles. And he just followed through. All right. He had a strong belief system, strong intrinsic drive as well, which is very important. So, guys, that's us. Thanks again for listening or watching to our show, Lessons from the Game, with my co-host, Ben Pegna. You can follow us on social media. You can follow Ben Pegna on Instagram, and I'm Gigi Steenkamp. But please send us some feedback. Ask us some questions so that we can deal with it in our future episodes as well. And if you enjoyed this, please subscribe to our channel. Share it with your friends. That will be much appreciated. That's us. Wish you guys an unbelievable week. Ciao.
Steve.